Hello, it is May. Let's talk about what I read in April. So, April was a slow reading month, to put it lightly. I think it was just the chunky books really slowed me down. But let's start at the beginning. First book I finished in April was Reminders of Him by Miss Colleen Hoover. I was really excited to read this. And unfortunately, it wasn't as good as I was hoping. A lot of people were saying this is her best one yet. And like, oh my god. And so I still enjoyed it. I just didn't feel fully invested in this one. So in this one we follow, what are their names? We follow Kenna and Rowan. The big drama here is that Kenna has been in jail. She gave birth while she was in jail. She's trying to reunite with her daughter. There's lots of legal just drama stopping her from doing that, where the family doesn't want her to be with them. And so for drama, the guy that she falls in love with is the best friend of her dead ex-boyfriend, who is the father of her child. Simple, right? I can partially blame myself for not enjoying this to the full because I didn't just read this uninterrupted. I was reading other books at the same time. I do remember there was just like, in the beginning, there was just like gut punches. There was like a really good passage. I think I actually took a picture of it, so I'll put it here. And I just thought that was really like oofed. So it started good, but the way I'd describe it is that I liked and cared for the characters individually, but as far as their actual romance, that wasn't developed enough for me to care. I cared about Kenna's backstory, and it was just like messy time. But as far as the romance, it was just like, it just felt like lust. But in the end, it was very cute. I wish there was more of the kid in here. Like, I think this is too short for what it is because we kind of had some things introduced that could have been like come full circle. Like, she gets a cat and she gets to meet her daughter, but that's like this much. And I'm like, that could have been expanded on. So yes, I still like it. If you like Colleen Hoover, still read it. But I'm just gonna be like, have a little grain of salt with that. Have a little grain of salt. For Reminders of Him, I gave it a 3-star rating. Next, I actually finished my reread of Elantras by Brandon Sanderson. So this was my first Brandon Sanderson back in the day, maybe like 2-3 years ago. I don't even know. And I remember really loving this and people being like, oh, it's his first book, poo-poo. And it just wasn't as good on a reread, but also in general, Brandon Sanderson is a different pacing, and so my mind tends to get stuck on the pacing. So I still really liked the characters in here. I do remember the full arc of Hrathen being more satisfying the first time. This time I was like, oh, okay. That could have been just more. But in general, like the magic system and the world is really cool. Something cool I picked up for anyone who's read it or wants to read it. So in the back, in the Ars Arcanum, there is a breakdown of these different like aeons, which are basically different runes that they do the magic to make different things happen. And what I noticed, the chapter headers are these different runes. But the thing is, as the perspective changes, it's not even like, oh, this is this character's rune. There is a rune every time different. So sure, some might get reused, but it kind of sets the tone for the chapter. So I wish I'd kind of noticed this earlier, but also that is way too much work to cross-reference every single time to get that full thing. I do feel like sometimes he overcomplicates it and I don't understand. So like even reading the Ars Arcanum, I'm like, this is cool that you're giving us more info on the magic, but we didn't actually develop the magic this far within the story, and it just feels superfluous and confusing. But maybe that's just me. But that being said, even with Mistborn, like the first era Mistborn, I think even at the end of that series, I would read the Ars Arcanum and not know what some of it was talking about because it was just too broad and not in the story enough. And even like reading some of the short stories about how things are linked, I was like, I have a vague idea, but I'm confused. But look, Brandon Sanderson do be writing some broad world building that's beyond one series. Like just the whole Cosme, how they're connected, and the different gods, I get confused. So it's a bit of a brain owie. But yeah, 3 stars. Next up, I read It Happened One Summer by Tessa Bailey. This is actually my first Tessa Bailey I've read, and I was reading it because Hook, Line and Sinker was a book club pick for The Citadel, which was Mel Reid's Patreon, and this is actually a spin-off, like, sequel, and people were like, you should read this first. So I did, and I just have lots of fun with it. Like, the writing is really easy, just the situations are really funny. I really like the backstory and the character development individually, as well as the romance. The only downside for me, some of the smart language is a bit cringe, but you know, that really is to individual taste. But sometimes I'm like, that's not sexy, that's just like taking me out of it, and kind of like, why would you phrase it like that? And then also something else I really didn't like was there was a sex scene where Piper decided she was just gonna stick a finger up Brendan's bum, and there just wasn't really like any consent around that, and so it ended up being fine in the end. Everyone had a good time and they kind of joked about it after, but it just didn't sit right with me, because as far as like just giving something a go, that is something you need to ask before doing, because that very easily could have gone the other way. But, you know, I guess like it's fiction. It was all set up that of course he was going to be fine with it, but it's just like, you know, it's drawing a line. It's a bit of a line there. But that being said, despite that kind of sticky situation and like some of the phrasing being a bit cringe, this was a very fun, sexy time, and I really liked it. And I'm probably going to read all of Tess Bailey's books now. And It Happened One Summer is a 4-star rating. And then the last book I read in April was A Discovery of Witches by Deborah Harkness. I've kind of heard of this series and the show, and I just never really delved into it. And I was excited to give this a go, but I do feel like it is very long for what it is. And for something that I would say is predominantly a fantasy romance, the romance is a hot mess. So I gave this a 3 stars. It had kind of like cozy vibe. If you are looking for fast-paced action, like this is not it. But we do kind of just have like cozy vibes of like, ooh, we're at the university library. Or like, ooh, I'm gonna have some tea. Or like, ooh, let's go to yoga class. And like, ooh, let's drink some wine. I did like the cozy vibe. I did not like the romance, as I said, in that it just happened very quickly and it was not developed. And even in saying that, like, you can have the love happen quickly, but you need to make the reader care. And the thing is, like, I just don't really care about the relationship. I care more about the drama that comes from their relationship, but I'm not like, these two are like meant to be. I ship it. Matthew is just very like pig-headed, controlling, annoying, and it was just very quickly like, let me tell it. And like there is a bit of sexy times in here, but definitely like on the lighter scale, which I can respect that, but I've seen it done better in YA, to be honest, with actually building that chemistry and that connection. It's just kind of like, oh yes, he did this. Moving on, I'm excited to see where the series goes. It's still good in a trashy way, but it could still just be better for what it is. But I'm interested enough to see where the plot goes, because there's some drama going on. It is cooking, and some of the magic introduced like right at the end. I'm like, oh, this is my shit. Mixed feelings, so I gave it a 3. And I actually started the show. I've just watched the first episode, and the show looks like it's going to be pretty good. So these are the 4 books I read in April. And I must say, I think Elantras is bottom of the stack, just because I didn't enjoy it as much the second time, and the pacing. And the best was It Happened One Summer, just because it made me happy. As for what I'm currently reading, I'm still reading The Lies of Locke Lamora, which I started in April, which I'm buddy reading with a friend, so that's why I'm still on it, but we're getting close. Fun times. Bit of problems with the pacing. Very broad world. Interesting to see like the arc and where this goes. Like I'm still invested. Could be better. Want stronger relationships. Want more women, to be honest. This is very just like, Yeah, the boys! The boys getting up to trouble, the boys scheming. I am also reading Shadow of Night, which is the second book in the All Souls trilogy, so the sequel to Discovery of Witches. Still very early. Again, just like cozy enjoying, but it does take more brain power. And as it just recently came out, I am reading Book Lovers by Emily Henry. Very early days, but I am enjoying it so far, so hopefully she doesn't stuff it up. Alright, that is what I read in April. This has been my new jacket. I'm obsessed. It is way too cold in Canberra. And I will see you next time. Bye-bye.